Welcome to the Shalom Learning Center 10-minute Lectorium, which is focused on the history of Jewish people and Judaism, which is very helpful in our understanding of the New Testament and beyond. This is lecture number 5, and we continue to talk about the diaspora. And this is the time for Babylonian Diaspora, which was created because by 586 BCE, King Nebuchadnezzar has deported a number of affluent Jews from Jerusalem and surrounding Judean towns to the Babylon, where he made them settle. And unfortunately, when King Cyrus took over Babylon and Babylonian Empire went into perdition and was replaced by Medo-Persian Empire, many Jews were not eager to return, even though the prophet Isaiah in chapter 48, 100 years or so before the event, appealed to the Jewish audience, saying, "Come out of Babylon." This was basically the condition for the reestablishment of prosperous Israel in the mind of Isaiah. In fact, in chapter 45 of his book, Isaiah calls Cyrus by name and literally calls him Mashiach, the anointed one. So God had a serious intentions to restart the vibrant and flourishing Israel, but these great plans, which included the restoration of magnificent temple, whose plans were described in the vision of the book of the prophet Ezekiel in his book, chapter 40 through 48, and also in the last chapters of the book of Isaiah, where this temple would literally almost become the center of the world, and everybody who accepts the Lord would come to this temple and would worship together with Jews and so forth. All these grandeur plans were predicated on the unity of Jewish people who would be returning back to Judea from all the places where they have been exiled. But it didn't happen. At least with Babylonian exile, it didn't happen. A very small number of Jews, around 40,000, came with Zerubbabel. The Lord blessed those people, and they were able to rebuild the temple by 515 BCE. But when the foundation of the temple was laid, many older people wept, because, first of all, they knew how the Solomon's temple looked like, and second of all, many hoped that the plans laid out by Ezekiel would be carried out. But such a small number of Jews just could not carry out such a plan. And that's why they did what they were able to accomplish. And they built a nice temple. However, this temple lacked the Ark of the Covenant and the Shekinah, the famous cloud that filled the temple, which was built by Solomon, and that filled the sanctuary, which was built by Moses. So this wasn't there. Nevertheless, God sent prophets, Zechariah and Haggai, who did their best to encourage Zerubbabel and Joshua, the high priest, to stand firm and continue. Interestingly enough, that temple, a second temple, had menorah, as we read in the book of Zechariah, chapter 4. The beautiful, unique menorah was apparently taken to Babylon by Nebuchadnezzar and was returned back according to the edict of Cyrus. It was definitely a divine miracle. Nevertheless, quite a large number of Jews stayed behind. The book of Esther is literally about those who stayed behind, including Mordecai, whose parents were the exiles, apparently the grandparents too, but he ended up living not in Mesopotamia, but in the Shushan. And the Shushan, it's already the territory of Persia. So not only Mordecai and many other Jews tried to go back, and I'm not talking about Mordecai, it's probably Mordecai's parents, because the book of Esther is talking about King Ahasuerus, who is basically Xerxes. Xerxes replaced Darius the First in the 480 something BC. He became the king after a long reign of Darius the First. So it was probably the parents of Mordecai who did not choose, or who chose not to go with Zerubbabel, and instead, when Medo-Persia flourished, they moved from the Mesopotamia, the original place of exile, into Persia, which basically created an Iranian Jewish diaspora that was flourishing and in existence over a long period of time, probably until 1979, the time of Ayatollah Khomeini. There was the Iranian Jews lived in Iran, and so in a way, the Book of Esther should not be taken really, really seriously when it comes to the deliverance of the Jews. It was more of a satire. God, through probably Mordecai himself, who wrote this, Mordecai and Esther, who realized what they went through, he was ridiculing those Jews who stayed behind. And so Esther was literally prostituted by Mordecai into the palace of the king Xerxes or Ahasuerus, and Mordecai hoped to receive favors, but instead Haman came, and the Haman was the descendants of Amalekites. So instead of receiving the favors, he put himself into a grave danger, and even the name of God was never used in the book of Esther, just because God wasn't with them. God was with those Jews who were in Jerusalem rebuilding the city, and it was not an easy job to rebuild all these ruins, all this land which was passed which was abandoned. And so this is the context of the book of Esther that tells us about the diaspora in Persia. But nevertheless, God was with the Jews in Persian diaspora, because at the very end, after fasting and prayer, God delivered them from extinction. And who knows, the son of Xerxes, Artaxerxes, could be halachically Jewish. He could have had Esther as his mother. And about this king we'll talk in our next lecture.